Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Priyanka Nanayakkara, and I'm a PhD candidate in computer science and communication at Northwestern University. Today, I'm going to share with you some strategies that you can use for communicating differential privacy guarantees to data subjects or people contributing their data. One second. Okay, so these findings are based on research done with my collaborators, Rachel Cummings, Gabriel Kapchuk, Alyssa Red-Miles, and Marianne Smart. So differential privacy, or DP, is a state-of-the-art approach to privacy-preserving data analysis. It allows us to learn patterns about groups of people while minimizing what we learn about individuals. More specifically, DP provides an individual-level privacy guarantee. So if we conduct an analysis under DP, then whether or not we include any given individual's information, we expect the outputs to be similar. Differentially private algorithms inject statistical noise into analyses to obscure individual-level information. In practice, the privacy guarantees that DP provides depend on how it's implemented. And so I'm going to talk about two of these really key implementation details next. First, there's the deployment model. So two common models are central and local. In the central model, at the top, noise is added by the data curator after raw data are collected. Whereas in the local model, noise is added before the data are sent to the data curator. For example, like noise is added on data subjects' devices. And so each of these models implies different threat models. Importantly, the data curator never has access to the raw data in the local model. So even if the database is hacked, attackers don't actually obtain people's raw information. Second is the privacy loss budget epsilon. So epsilon determines how much noise is added. Smaller privacy loss budgets mean more noise is added, and therefore we have stronger privacy protections. So epsilon is a unitless and contextless parameter. So saying that we used an epsilon of 1 versus 17, that doesn't mean that much on its own to a data subject. Yet epsilon plays a really crucial role in the strength of privacy protections. So given how important these two implementation choices are, we can ask whether explanations of DP found in practice provide information on these two details. In late 2019, my collaborators analyzed 76 descriptions of DP found across industry, media outlets, and academic writing. And they were looking for patterns in how DP is explained. They found that sometimes explanations describe DP broadly as a, quote, gold standard. Sometimes they generally describe risk. Other times they summarize methods or techniques of achieving DP. And at other times, they talk about what DP enables us to learn. But in general, as you can see, explanations don't describe privacy implications specific to deployment model or epsilon. And one reason might be that explaining these details is hard. For example, explaining implications of the local versus central model entails instilling in people strong mental models of which information flows are restricted or enabled. And epsilon is hard to explain since it's not only unitless and contextless, but it also implies probabilistic guarantees, and we know that people struggle with reasoning under uncertainty. So our goal was to overcome these challenges and design effective explanations of DP that expose privacy implications related to deployment model and epsilon. So we conducted two separate studies, and today I'll share with you high-level findings about what worked best from each study. When explaining implications based on a deployment model, we tried 3 different approaches: metaphors, diagrams, and privacy labels. And through iterative interviews and a survey with over 700 people, we found that privacy labels seem to work best for conveying which information flows are restricted under the local versus central model. So in this talk, I'll focus on describing privacy labels. Each row of the privacy label describes whether an information flow to a particular recipient is restricted without DP and then with DP. We choose to show these potential recipients that prior work finds people care about. So for example, hackers, employees of the organization curating data, and viewers of graphs of the collected data. The second column shows that without DP, all of these parties may be able to see the raw information. And last, the third column shows which flows are restricted under DP. And here is the example for the local model, where we see that all the flows in this chart are restricted. And here's an example for the central model, where only the first flow is restricted, so nothing else about the table has changed. Our high-level takeaway here is that privacy labels are useful in conveying implications of DP given a deployment model. And one last point is that we found people actually wanted to know more than just implications. So privacy labels help with explaining implications, but people also wanted to know something about the process of how their data would be protected. So when we added a short piece of text that described the process, we were able to improve trust. So next, I'm going to share some learnings from explaining epsilon. In this study, we developed and evaluated 3 portable explanation methods drawing on best practices from risk communication and usability. And interestingly, we found that all 3 methods increased willingness to share data compared to an explanation of DP that did not include any epsilon information. We conducted a survey where we showed these explanations to over 900 people, and we found that the odds-based visual method, so the third one, was the most effective since it increases risk comprehension and feelings of having enough information to make a data sharing decision. So I'm going to focus on this one. Our odds-based visual method combines text with a visualization. And first, I'll walk through the text component. So we show probabilities corresponding to a negative outcome if a data subject does not share versus shares data. And in our USENIX security paper, we demonstrate how to calculate these probabilities, assuming a Bayesian adversary with some specified prior. And I'll skip these details for now, but they're all available online. I want to point out that we intentionally show probabilities corresponding to immediate decisions that people can actually make, so sharing data versus not sharing data. And in this way, people have information that aligns with the choices in front of them. We also frame probabilities as frequencies instead of percentages, so we say 5 out of 100 versus 5%, because research has found this framing helps people reason about probabilities more effectively. Okay, so now we can add the visualization. This is what the complete odds-based visual explanation looks like. We visualize the probabilities as icon arrays. Icon arrays are a frequency-framed method of visualizing probabilities, and they've been shown to potentially help people with low numeracy skills better reason under uncertainty. The idea is that each icon represents a possible output, and that those colored in blue or orange indicate outputs that would lead to a negative outcome. The shape of these icons can be adapted to suit the specific deployment context. For example, the icons here show potential reports, but they just as easily could show potential websites if the data will be published on a website, for example. So as one last takeaway from this study, we found that people are in fact sensitive to changes in epsilon. As privacy strength increases, people are more willing to share data. And you can see this especially clearly with the odds-based visual explanation, which we just looked at, which is in purple on this graph. So you see when we have really strong privacy protections, there's much higher willingness to share data, and as we weaken privacy protections, that willingness also goes down. So to wrap up, I'll summarize some findings that can help increase transparency with data subjects around DP. So in our first study, we investigated how to explain implications of the deployment model. We found that privacy labels are useful in conveying which information flows are restricted, and that adding text describing process additionally improves trust. And in our second study, we developed explanation methods for epsilon. So we found that our odds-based visual method improves risk comprehension and feelings of having enough information to make a data sharing decision. And we also found that willingness to share data is in fact sensitive to changes in epsilon. While our work focuses on differential privacy, we also believe our studies offer potential lessons that may extend to other privacy-enhancing technologies broadly. So first, we should focus on exposing key decision-making information, even if that information is complicated. So in our work, instead of hiding probabilities when explaining epsilon, we focused on making them interpretable by using techniques from risk communication. Second, it may not be enough to explain implications of the PET alone. So we found in explaining deployment models that people also wanted to know something about process. And prior work has explored similar things about like process and outcome in the context of encryption. And last, it can be useful to also explain utility as well as privacy. So this lesson comes from our qualitative findings, which I didn't have a chance to get into during this talk, but in both studies, people made comments indicating that they wanted to know more about or otherwise cared about the kind of impact their data would have on the world around them. Okay, with that, I'll end. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to hearing any of your questions and thoughts.